Good evening, students. This is a video from the general anatomy from the chapter lymphatic systems and its components. So, in this video, very briefly, I will tell you about the various components of our lymphatic system. As you have already must have finished by this time, the cardiovascular system or the blood vascular system. Okay, so the lymphatic system is an auxiliary system. Okay, it is a supporting system to that of the cardiovascular system. That will be clear as soon as I will explain this to you. What is lymph? Let us come to know first what is lymph and how it is produced. From your cardiovascular system or blood vessels you have learned in general anatomy, it is evident that the arteries ultimately becomes arteriole, that is the terminal arterioles, meta-arterioles, and then they break up in the tissue in capillaries. And these capillaries have an arterial end and a venule end. At this arterial end, the plasma from the capillaries comes out and it bathes the tissue. That means the cells which are present in the tissue, they are surrounded by this plasma which comes out from capillary. There takes place an exchange between the cells of the tissues and that of the plasma. Oxygen is taken in, carbon dioxide is given in this plasma, and then the nutrients they are also exchanged. The waste materials they are thrown inside the plasma which is in the intercellular space or in the tissue fluid. Thus this is a tissue fluid which bath or which surrounds the cells of a tissue. That's why it is called as tissue fluid. Excuse me. Now, at the venule end or the venous end of the capillary, what happens that all this tissue fluid which has come out through the capillaries and was bathing to that the cells of the tissue, it gets reabsorbed. But it is not reabsorbed 100%. About 80 to 90% of the tissue fluids get reabsorbed at the venous end, and then it forms the venules, and venules join to form a small vein, and thus the large veins are formed which drain into the blood. Then what about those remaining tissue fluid which cannot be absorbed by the capillaries? Okay, venule end of the capillaries. Now this about 20 to 10% of the tissue fluid, it cannot be absorbed by venules because it contains the fat droplets, it contains the large molecules, it contains the particulated matter. Large molecules means that of proteins, and then it contains the particulate matters which cannot be absorbed by capillary, because the capillary absorption is a little have the barriers. Okay, it has the barriers. So this remaining 10 to 20% of the tissue fluid is reabsorbed by another set of capillaries, and these capillaries are called as the lymph capillaries. Now in the yellow color I have drawn the lymph capillaries which forms a network in the tissue fluid or in the tissue. Now these capillaries, they have the blind ends and they absorb the tissue fluid, and this tissue fluid consists of the lymph which is absorbed in the lymph capillaries, and then it is passing through the lymph vessels which are called as lymphatic. This is called as the lymph. Now this lymph which is absorbed through these blind-ended capillaries from the tissue, okay, this is nothing. Its composition is almost the same as that of the tissue fluid. Okay, thus the tissue fluid which is drained by the lymph vessel is called as the lymph. So this will be the definition of the lymph. What is lymph? Lymph is the tissue fluid which is drained by the lymph vessel is called as the lymph. The lymphatic system consists of the lymph vessels, lymph nodes. Okay, so these lymph vessels which arise from the capillaries, okay, from the various tissues, they go and then they pass the, it's a lymph flowing through these lymph vessels which are called as lymphatic, pass through the lymph nodes, and ultimately this passes through many sets of the lymph node, and then the large lymph vessel that then drain this lymph into the venous system, or it is drained in the large veins at the root of the neck, okay, at the root of the neck. Thus, we will see that whatsoever tissue fluid which was not absorbed by the capillaries, which otherwise should have been, is absorbed by the lymph capillaries, lymphatics, and but ultimately it is drained in the venous system, which is the part of the cardiovascular system or the blood vessels. So, in this way, the lymph system or lymphatic system is helping to that of the venous system in draining the tissue fluid, okay, in draining that. So that's why I said that in the introductory remark that lymphatic system is an auxiliary to that of the venous system. So this a brief introduction must have given you an idea what is lymph and how it is formed, okay, and how ultimately this lymph which passes through lymph capillaries ultimately drains into the veins, okay, and it ultimately reaches to the heart, okay, reaches to the heart. Now this lymphatic system is very important system because it also act as immune system of the body, because it protect our body from that of the foreign invasion or infections, okay, we will see in the next video. Now let us come to what are the component of this lymphatic system, okay. The component of this lymphatic system are many, okay, these are the many. For example, the first component which we have just seen, which is formed by the tissue fluid, is the lymph. So we will learn in this very short about lymph. Then we will learn about the lymph capillaries, okay. Then the lymph vessels, how the lymph vessels are ultimately they unite with each other to form a large lymph vessel, and then how this lymph passes through the various sets of the lymph nodes, okay. Then we will learn about the lymph node, and then I will tell you which are the other lymphatic organs, okay, like spleen and thymus, okay, spleen and thymus. Let us come to the first component, and that is the lymph. So let us see the lymph here, okay. The first component of this is the lymph. Lymph is a clear watery tissue fluid. What is it? It is a tissue fluid which was formed because of the filtration of the capillary at its arterial end, okay, and this is thus very similar to that of the plasma, blood plasma. So it is clearly watery tissue fluid which is not absorbed by the venous end of the capillary, and thus it is absorbed by the lymph capillary, not by the blood capillaries, but by the lymph capillaries. Now this lymph at certain places, for example, the lymph absorbed in the intestine is white in color because it contains large number of the fat droplets which are absorbed from our food, okay, through the intestine, and that's why the lymph which is being drained by the intestinal wall, it looks white, and this is called as chyle or chyle, okay, this is called a chyle or chyle, okay. Now this lymph, okay, not only contain the clear watery fluid, but there are various particles, okay, large molecules are present in this lymph and these large molecules are that of the proteins, and they are so large that they cannot be absorbed by that of the blood capillaries, so they are absorbed by the lymph capillaries. Similarly, the large fat droplets which cannot be absorbed by the blood capillaries are very well absorbed by that of the lymph capillaries. And similarly, particulate matters, the particles, small particles which were not absorbed by the venous end of the capillary, they are absorbed by the blind ended lymph capillary. For example, the particles of carbon, the dust, the bacteria, okay, the bacteria, and sometimes the cancer cell. When a person is suffering from cancer, these cells get detached from the tumor of the cancer and they are present in the tissue fluid, and they are also absorbed by the lymph capillary, because these are large cells and they are not absorbed by the blood capillaries. Thus the cancer is spreads through the lymphatic system or lymph vessel from one place to that of the other place. This is about the lymph, okay, about the lymph, how it is formed and what is its composition. Let's come to the second component, and it is the lymph capillary, okay. It is now this lymph capillaries, as I said, they are the blind ended capillaries, okay, blind ended network of the vessel, lymph vessels, okay. And this network is present in the tissue spaces where capillary network is. That means two network, capillary network and that of the network of the lymph capillaries. Okay, blood capillaries and lymph capillaries, they are present both in the tissue space. And here these capillaries, they absorb the tissue fluid with the large molecules of protein and particulate matters, okay, fat droplets like that. Now, if you compare the blind-ended lymph capillary, see here, this is a blind-ended lymph capillary, okay, and here you will see that this is endothelial cells which are bounding the lymph capillary. They are resting on this continuous plasma membrane, or basement membrane is not continuous, and there is a gap between the overlapping cell. The endothelial cells, they overlap with each other in such a way that the particulate matter or the lymph, okay, then the fat droplets, they can go inside the capillary lumen, just pushing the space between the two endothelial cells, because it is discontinuous plasma membrane is here, which is not the case in the blood capillaries. So it provides, there are a lot of openings to the lymph capillaries which provides the passage of these large molecules inside the capillary space or in the lymph, inside the lymph, okay. So this is, I mean to say, composition or the structure of the lymph capillary is thus different than of the blood capillaries, and that is the reason why this lymph can absorb, I mean to say, in the vessels can absorb the large molecules because of this region, okay, because of this, okay. Now these endothelial cells which they overlap each other, and the gap between that gives passage, but nothing can escape outside in the tissue fluid from this lymph capillary, because these overlapping endothelial cells, they act as a valve, okay. So there is only unidirectional or one directional flow is there. The things can come inside, but they cannot go outside the lymph capillaries. So there is the presence of the valve. So this is an easy mechanism of the absorption of the lymph fluid or the lymph or the tissue fluid through the lymph capillaries, okay. Now coming to the third component, and that is the lymph vessel. Now this lymph capillaries, they will ultimately, just a minute, this lymph capillary will ultimately form the lymphatics. This is the book, okay, written by me. This is General Anatomy, published by PP, and I am thankful to the publisher for allowing me to use this diagram. Now this is the tissue fluid, the lymph capillaries in green, and then this is the lymphatic has formed here, okay. This lymphatic means lymph vessels. So many small lymph vessels from the tissue will join to form a lymphatics or lymph vessel. Now after some time, these lymph vessels which are having the valves. You can see the valves. At short distance there are valves, and valves are there because the lymph, if it comes into the vessel, it cannot go back. It has to go in one direction only, as suggested by these arrows. Okay, the black arrows are here. Then this will pass through a kidney shaped structure or organ, what is called as the lymph node. Lymph node are the structure, and while passing this there will be many lymph node. The lymph has to pass through many lymph node. The lymph node are the organs in which there takes place the filtration in the sense that whatsoever particulate matter or bacteria are there will be eaten away by phagocytic cell inside the lymph node. Okay, inside. So one can say that in this way the lymph keeps on filtering at various stations of the lymph node. Second important fact which takes place in here in the lymph node is that they produce also the lymphocytes. That means the white blood cell lymphocytes are produced in the lymph, and this lymphocyte then they come in the lymph. So the lymph then contain also a very important blood cell, and that is called as the lymphocytes. They are, which are immune cells. Okay. And ultimately when various lymph vessels will join, okay, or lymphatics will join to each other, they will form a large lymph trunk. Okay, let us see in this diagram also. At the convex site of this lymph node, many afferent lymphatics will open, but from the concave or the hilum site of the lymph node, only one lymphatic vessel will go. Okay, so this is the general structure of the lymph nodes. Now this large vessel, when they will form, ultimately when this large vessel, they will drain into the venous system or into a large vein at the root of the neck, at the junction of the internal jugular and the subclavian vein. Okay, on right side the right lymphatic duct will drain, and on left side it is the thoracic duct will drain into the venous system. In this diagram, let us see in this diagram. This is the right side at the junction of the internal jugular vein and the subclavian vein. This the right lymphatic duct will drain. On to the left side at the same junction, internal jugular and subclavian vein, the another duct will open, which is called as thoracic duct. Okay, so right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct, they are the major duct which will ultimately open the and bring the lymph from the whole of the body, which will be poured into the venous system. Okay, it will be poured into the venous system. Now this lymphatics, okay, are the lymph vessels. Okay, they drain the lymph from various parts of the body. Okay, and this region for the drainage of this lymph is fixed, very much specific. Okay, for example, the right lymphatic duct drains the lymph from right side of the head and neck. So, and from the right upper limb and the right half of the thoracic cavity. For example, see this diagram. This shaded area shows the area of drainage of this right lymphatics. Okay, right lymphatic duct. This drains, okay, or trunk, right lymph trunk. This drains the half of the right side of the head and neck. It drains the right upper limb. It drains the thoracic cage, okay, and thorax, okay, trunk, and upper part of the a little part of the abdomen through this right lymphatic duct, okay, or trunk, okay, into the venous system. The rest of the part of the body, it is drained by that of the thoracic duct onto the left side, okay, onto the left side. So the areas are very much fixed which are drained by a particular lymphatics. They are very, so the left lymphatic trunk will ultimately drain into the thoracic duct, which will drain the ultimately drain onto the left side. Okay, onto the left side. Let us come to the fourth component of the lymphatic system, which we have partly already discussed, lymph node, which are the bean-shaped structure. As I said that these lymph nodes, they are the bean-shaped which has the afferent lymphatics, which will on its convex side the lymph will come, and it through the hilum the lymph will go by a single lymph vessels. Okay, lymphal, and as I said, they are the station for the filtration of the lymph. That means the bacteria are eaten away by the phagocytic cells, and they also produce the I mean to say lymphocytes. Okay, they produce the lymphocyte. Now all these lymph nodes are not arranged as a single lymph node. In the various part of the body there are the groups of the lymph node. For example, if you can see in this diagram, see these groups of a small dotted structure. These are the group of the lymph node: inguinal group, then pelvic group, thoracic group, popliteal group of the lymph nodes. Similarly here, axial group of lymph nodes, cervical group. So they are present in the groups, okay, lymph node, and they drain a very specific area. That means if you get an enlarged lymph node, you can predict which area must be having the infection by which the lymph node has enlarged. So lymph nodes are very important, okay, in checking the spread of the infection as well as in checking the spread of cancer. As I said, the cancer cells are also carried by the lymph, okay, through the lymph vessel. Last component of the lymphatic system is the other lymphatic tissues or organ. The other lymphatic organ in our body is spleen, okay, and then it is thymus, okay, thymus. These are two organs. But then the lymphoid tissue or collection of the lymphocytes is also seen in various other organs. For example, in tonsil, in our throat, we get the enlargement of the tonsil. They are lymphoid tissues, okay, and then we have, you must have seen in your lower classes in the section of the intestine, especially ileum, there are the lymphatic collection, what is called as Pierce patches. There are many other lymphatic tissue present in other organs of the body, and they serve the same purpose, that is they are defensive in nature, in restricting the spread of the infection. This is a very short about the introduction of the lymphatic system. Thank you very much for watching this video.